The crisp air of autumn settled over Arkham, Massachusetts, painting the town in hues of red, orange, and gold. The Gothic architecture of Miskatonic University stood as a testament to both its academic prominence and its storied past. Among these venerable halls, the whispers of secret societies and ancient tomes were not merely legend. They were a chilling reality. Elliot Brooks and I arrived at the university in the wake of a tragic series of events. 3 esteemed professors had been brutally murdered, their deaths shrouded in mystery and leaving the academic community reeling. The local police, baffled by the lack of evidence, turned to Elliot, whose reputation as a brilliant detective was well known. Our first stop was the office of Professor Lawrence Archer, the first victim. Dean Harrison, a distinguished man whose eyes betrayed the burden of recent events, led us through the winding corridors. The scene was a chaotic jumble of papers and books, with a dark stain on the carpet marking where Archer had met his end. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," Dean Harrison said, his voice tinged with desperation. "These murders have cast a pall over our institution. We need your expertise to bring this nightmare to an end." "We'll do everything we can to help," Elliot replied, his gaze methodically scanning the room. "Dean Harrison, can you tell us more about the victims?" The dean hesitated before answering. Each of the victims was a member of the Society of the Arcane. It was a clandestine group dedicated to the study of ancient, forbidden knowledge. They believed that certain rituals and artifacts could unlock immense power. Elliot's interest was piqued. "The Society of the Arcane, you say? What sort of activities were they involved in?" "The Society's activities were shrouded in secrecy," Dean Harrison explained. "But from what I understand, they delved into ancient texts and conducted experiments that pushed the boundaries of science and the supernatural. Professor Archer was particularly obsessed with an artifact he believed was hidden on campus. As we examined the office, Elliot's mind began piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. He knelt by the stain on the carpet, his gloved fingers tracing its edge. "Were there any signs of forced entry?" "No," Dean Harrison replied. "The police found no evidence of a break-in. It's as if the killer simply appeared and vanished." Elliot's brow furrowed in thought. "Interesting. It suggests that the killer had intimate knowledge of the victims and their routines. Perhaps someone within the university." Our investigation took us to the office of the second victim, Professor Margaret Clayton. Her office, like Professor Archer's, was in disarray. Among the chaos, I spotted a peculiar book on her desk, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams. "Elliot, take a look at this," I said, holding up the book. "It seems to be related to the Society's research." Elliot took the book, his eyes scanning the pages. "This appears to be a grimoire, a book of spells and rituals. The Society of the Arcane was clearly involved in some dangerous practices." As we delved deeper into our investigation, a pattern emerged. Each victim had been an expert in their respective fields and a member of the Society, united in their pursuit of the artifact. The university's extensive library held the Society's journals and notes, which provided us with more insight into their activities. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elliot and I pored over the Society's journals in the dimly lit library. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shapes on the walls, and the silence was broken only by the rustling of pages. "Elliot, these journals mention a powerful artifact that the Society believed was hidden within the walls of Miskatonic," I said, my voice hushed with urgency. "They referred to it as the Eye of Thoth, said to grant immense power to its possessor." Elliot's eyes gleamed with interest. "The Eye of Thoth. It must be the common thread that ties the murders together. The killer must be after it. But who would go to such lengths to obtain it?" I wondered aloud. "And why now?" As if in response to our musings, a loud crash echoed through the library. We rushed to the source of the noise and found a young woman standing over a fallen bookshelf, her face pale with fear. "I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to." "Who are you?" Elliot asked, his eyes narrowing. "My name is Sarah Whitman," she replied, her voice shaky. "I'm a graduate student. I was assisting Professor Archer with his research before he died. Elliot's gaze softened. You're not in any trouble, Sarah. We're just trying to understand what's happening here. Can you tell us anything about the artifact? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Professor Archer believed the Eye of Thoth was hidden in the old chapel on the edge of campus. He said it was protected by powerful wards and that only someone with the proper knowledge could access it. Thank you, Sarah, Elliot said, his tone reassuring. You've been very helpful. As we made our way to the chapel, the sun had long since set, and the campus was shrouded in darkness. The chapel, a weathered and ancient building, loomed before us, its stone walls covered in ivy. It was clear that it hadn't been used in years, and a sense of foreboding washed over me as we approached. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The flickering light from our lanterns cast eerie shadows on the walls as we searched the chapel for any sign of the artifact. At last, we found a hidden compartment beneath the altar. Inside was a small, ornate box, covered in strange symbols. This must be it, Elliot said, carefully lifting the box. But we need to be cautious. Whatever's inside could be dangerous. As we examined the box, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne, a respected professor of anthropology who had been a close associate of the victims. Dr. Hawthorne, I said, surprised. What are you doing here? Her eyes gleamed with a strange intensity. I've come to claim what's rightfully mine, she declared, her voice cold and unyielding. The Eye of Thoth belongs to me. Elliot's grip tightened on the box. You were the one behind the murders, he said, his voice calm but firm. Dr. Hawthorne's expression twisted into a malevolent smile. Yes, and now I will have the power that I've sought for so long. The power that the Society of the Arcane foolishly tried to keep from me. Before we could react, she lunged at Elliot, her hands clawing for the box. In the struggle, the box fell to the ground, and the lid sprang open. A blinding light filled the chapel, and a chilling scream echoed through the air. When the light faded, Dr. Hawthorne lay motionless on the floor, her face frozen in a rictus of terror. The artifact, a small, intricately carved stone, lay beside her. Elliot knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. She's gone, he said quietly, consumed by the very power she sought. The weight of what had transpired hung heavily in the air. The artifact had claimed another victim, but its secrets remained locked away, forever beyond reach. We stood in silence, contemplating the dark path that had led us here. Elliot and I would have to continue our investigation into the mysteries of Miskatonic University. The morning sun barely penetrated the fog that wrapped itself around the campus of Miskatonic University. The chill in the air hinted at the long New England winter yet to come. Despite the sinister events of the previous night, classes resumed as usual, students milling about in thick coats and scarves, their breath visible in the cold air. Elliot and I knew that our work was far from over. We had uncovered dark secrets, but there were still many questions left unanswered. The Society of the Arcane had been involved in practices that blurred the line between science and the supernatural, and we needed to uncover their full extent. While Elliot continued to analyze the evidence we had gathered, I decided to meet with Sarah Whitman again. Her insights had been invaluable, and I believed she might have more information that could help us piece together the puzzle. I found her in the library, once again surrounded by ancient texts and manuscripts. Miguel, she greeted me with a tired smile. I've been going through Professor Archer's notes. I think I've found something significant. She handed me a journal, its pages filled with detailed accounts of the Society's experiments. Professor Archer believed that the Eye of Thoth had the power to control minds, she explained. He was trying to find a way to neutralize its effects, but he ran out of time. The implications of her words were chilling. If the artifact had the potential to control minds, it was even more dangerous than we had initially thought. Did Professor Archer have any theories about how the artifact worked? I asked. Sarah nodded. He believed that the Eye of Thoth was imbued with ancient magic, tied to the rituals performed by the Society. He was working on deciphering the symbols and incantations, but he didn't get the chance to finish. As I absorbed this information, Elliot arrived, his expression serious. "We've got a lead," he said. "I've been looking into Vincent Blackwood's activities, and it seems he's been funding the Society's experiments. He's our prime suspect." The revelation sent a shiver down my spine. Vincent Blackwood was a powerful figure with a reputation for ruthlessness. If he was indeed behind the murders, we were up against a formidable adversary. "We need to confront Blackwood," Elliot continued. "But we have to be careful. He has resources and influence that we can't underestimate." We decided to pay Blackwood a visit, hoping to gather more information. His mansion, an imposing structure surrounded by manicured gardens, exuded an air of wealth and power. As we approached the grand entrance, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. A butler greeted us at the door and escorted us to Blackwood's study. The man himself was waiting for us, his tall frame and piercing eyes giving off an aura of authority. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What brings you to my home?" "We're investigating the recent murders at Miskatonic University," Elliot replied, his tone calm and measured. "We have reason to believe you may have information that could help us." Blackwood's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "I'm always willing to assist the authorities, but I assure you, I have no knowledge of these murders." Elliot wasn't convinced. "We've uncovered evidence that suggests you were funding the Society of the Arcane's experiments. We'd like to know more about your involvement." Blackwood's smile tightened. The Society was merely a philanthropic endeavor, a way to support academic research. I had no knowledge of any unethical activities. As we continued our conversation, it became clear that Blackwood was not going to reveal anything willingly. We left the mansion with more questions than answers, but Elliot was undeterred. "He's hiding something," Elliot said as we drove away. "We need to dig deeper into his connections and find out what he's really up to." Our investigation into Vincent Blackwood led us to some startling discoveries. We learned that he had been using his vast resources to manipulate and control key figures within Miskatonic University. The Society's experiments were just the tip of the iceberg. Blackwood had far-reaching plans that threatened to destabilize the academic community and beyond. Elliot and I worked tirelessly, piecing together the puzzle. We uncovered evidence of bribery, blackmail, and even threats against those who opposed Blackwood's ambitions. It was clear that he was a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. One night, as we sifted through a stack of documents, Elliot's phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice filled with panic. "Miguel, Elliot, you need to come to the library right away. I found something that changes everything." We rushed to the library, where Sarah was waiting for us, her hands trembling as she held an old, weathered book. "This book," she said, her voice shaky. "It's a record of the Society's darkest secrets, rituals, sacrifices, experiments. It's all here, and there's more." She opened the book to a marked page, revealing a detailed account of an ancient ritual that the Society had been trying to recreate. The ritual promised to grant unimaginable power to those who performed it, but at a terrible cost. "Blackwood's been trying to harness this power for himself," Elliot said, his voice filled with resolve. "We need to stop him before it's too late." Our discovery of the ritual marked a turning point in our investigation. We knew that Blackwood was planning something monumental, and we had to act fast to thwart his plans. We decided to confront him at his mansion, knowing that it would be a dangerous and potentially deadly encounter. As we approached the mansion, the air was thick with tension. Elliot and I exchanged a determined glance, ready for whatever lay ahead. We entered the grand foyer, where Blackwood awaited us, flanked by several of his loyal henchmen. "So, you've come to confront me?" Blackwood said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Do you really think you can stop me?" "We know what you're planning, Blackwood," Elliot replied, his voice steady. "You're trying to perform that ancient ritual, and we're here to stop you." Blackwood's smile twisted into a sneer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. The power I seek is beyond your comprehension." A tense standoff ensued, and it quickly escalated into a violent confrontation. Elliot's martial arts skills were put to the test as he fought off Blackwood's henchmen, while I tried to disable the ritual setup in the mansion's grand hall. In the chaos, Blackwood attempted to complete the ritual, but Elliot's quick thinking and determination thwarted his plans. As the ritual's energies began to spiral out of control, Blackwood was consumed by the very power he sought, leaving nothing but a charred, lifeless husk. The weight of what had transpired hung heavily in the air. The artifact had claimed another victim, but its secrets remained locked away, forever beyond reach. We stood in silence, contemplating the dark path that had led us here. Elliot and I knew that our investigation was far from over, and the mysteries of Miskatonic University were just beginning to unfold. The sun's first light barely penetrated the dense fog that clung to the town of Arkham, casting long, eerie shadows over the historic buildings of Miskatonic University. The events of the previous night played on a continuous loop in my mind. While we had confronted Blackwood and disrupted his nefarious plans, it was evident that we had only scratched the surface of a much deeper conspiracy. Elliot and I returned to the library, our sanctuary of knowledge and the heart of our investigation. We had collected a mountain of documents, journals, and ancient texts, each piece contributing to the intricate puzzle we were trying to solve. The air was thick with the scent of old books and ink, a comforting reminder of the scholarly pursuits that once filled these halls. "Sarah, could you join us?" I called out to the young graduate student, who was immersed in yet another ancient tome. She looked up, her eyes reflecting the weariness of sleepless nights spent deciphering cryptic texts. "Of course, Miguel. What have you found?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and fatigue. Elliot spread out several documents on the large oak table. "We need to focus on the Society of the Arcane's rituals and experiments. There has to be something we've missed, some clue that will lead us to the heart of their operations." Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the papers. "I've been analyzing Professor Archer's notes, and there's one entry that stands out. He mentioned a hidden chamber beneath the old chapel, a place where the society conducted their most secretive rituals." "Then that's where we need to go," Elliot said decisively. "But we have to be prepared for anything." As we gathered our belongings and prepared to venture back to the chapel, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The chapel, with its ivy-covered stone walls and weathered facade, seemed to hold the weight of centuries of secrets. It was a place where the past and present intertwined, and where darkness lingered just out of sight. We made our way through the fog-shrouded campus, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The chapel loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the pale morning light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay, and the flickering light from our lanterns cast eerie shadows on the walls. Elliot led the way, his keen eyes scanning every corner for signs of the hidden chamber. We searched the chapel methodically, examining the altar, the pews, and the floor. At last, Sarah's sharp eyes spotted a faint outline of a trapdoor beneath the pulpit. "Here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This must be it." With a sense of trepidation, we pried open the trapdoor, revealing a set of narrow stone steps that descended into darkness. The air grew colder as we descended, the walls damp and lined with ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. The chamber below was a stark contrast to the chapel above. It was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with occult symbols and shelves filled with bizarre artifacts. In the center of the room stood an altar, its surface stained with what looked like dried blood. Elliot and I exchanged a tense glance, knowing that we had entered the very heart of the society's dark practices. We approached the altar cautiously, our lanterns illuminating the grotesque carvings that decorated its surface. "Look at these symbols," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "They match the ones in Professor Archer's notes. This is where they performed their rituals." As we examined the chamber, we found more evidence of the society's activities. Journals detailing their experiments, ancient texts describing forbidden rituals, and vials of strange substances that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It was clear that the society had been engaged in practices that defied the boundaries of science and morality. Elliot's sharp eyes caught sight of a large, ornate chest hidden in a shadowy corner of the chamber. "Help me with this," he said, beckoning Sarah and me over. Together, we heaved the heavy lid open, revealing the chest's contents. Inside were several ancient scrolls, each one meticulously preserved and covered in arcane symbols. There were also ritual implements, daggers, chalices, and incense burners, each one exquisitely crafted and exuding an aura of malevolence. "This must be where they kept the most valuable and dangerous items," Elliot mused, carefully unrolling one of the scrolls. These scrolls could hold the key to understanding their rituals and the true nature of the Eye of Thoth. As we continued to explore the chamber, a sudden noise echoed through the narrow passage leading back to the chapel. The sound of footsteps, deliberate and measured, sent a shiver down my spine. We extinguished our lanterns and moved silently to the shadows, our breaths held as we listened intently. The figure that emerged from the passage was cloaked in darkness, their features obscured by the dim light. But as they stepped closer, the glint of a dagger in their hand was unmistakable. Elliot reacted with lightning speed, his martial arts training coming to the fore as he disarmed the intruder with a swift, precise move. The dagger clattered to the ground, and the figure stumbled back, revealing a familiar face. "Dean Harrison?" I exclaimed, my voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. The dean's expression was a twisted mask of anger and desperation. "You should have stayed away," he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "You have no idea what you've uncovered." "Why, Dean Harrison?" Elliot demanded, his tone ice-cold. "Why are you involved in this?" The dean's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and defiance. "The society promised power, knowledge beyond our wildest dreams. But they were wrong, dead wrong. The Eye of Thoth is a curse, not a blessing. It twists the minds of those who seek it." As he spoke, the truth began to unravel. Dean Harrison had been drawn into the society's web of deceit and manipulation, seduced by the promise of untold power. But the artifact had exacted a terrible price, driving him to madness and murder. "We can end this," Elliot said, his voice steady. "But you have to tell us everything you know." The dean's resolve seemed to waver, and he slumped to the ground, his shoulders shaking with the weight of his guilt. "There's a ritual," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "A way to destroy the Eye of Thoth. But it requires a great sacrifice." As we absorbed the gravity of his words, the chamber seemed to grow colder, the oppressive darkness pressing in around us. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but we had no choice but to see it through to the end. With Dean Harrison's reluctant cooperation, we gathered the necessary components for the ritual. The ancient scrolls provided the incantations, and the artifacts from the chest held the power to channel the ritual's energy. It was a delicate and dangerous process, one that required absolute precision. As we prepared for the ritual, the tension in the air was palpable. The weight of our task pressed heavily on our shoulders, knowing that failure could result in unimaginable consequences. The chamber was filled with the flickering light of candles, their flames casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Elliot, Sarah, and I took our positions around the altar, the ancient incantations echoing through the chamber as we began the ritual. Dean Harrison, his face etched with remorse, knelt before the altar, offering himself as the necessary sacrifice. The air crackled with energy as the ritual reached its climax, the symbols on the walls glowing with an otherworldly light. The Eye of Thoth, placed at the center of the altar, seemed to pulse with a malevolent force, resisting our attempts to destroy it. In a final, desperate effort, Elliot channeled his own energy into the ritual, his voice rising above the cacophony of ancient words. The chamber trembled, and a blinding light filled the space, obscuring everything from view. When the light finally faded, the chamber was silent, the oppressive darkness lifted. The Eye of Thoth was gone, its power extinguished. Dean Harrison lay still before the altar, his sacrifice not in vain. The confrontation with Dean Harrison had revealed a new layer of the dark conspiracy that enveloped Miskatonic University. While the Eye of Thoth had been destroyed and its immediate threat neutralized, Elliot and I knew that there were still many unanswered questions and dangerous secrets lurking beneath the surface. The university's historic campus, with its ivy-covered stone buildings and tree-lined pathways, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. The students went about their daily routines, unaware of the ancient forces that had nearly claimed their lives. For Elliot and me, there was no time to rest. Our investigation had taken a dangerous turn, and we needed to uncover the full extent of the Society of the Arcane's influence. Elliot's intuition led us back to the extensive library, where we immersed ourselves in the Society's journals, documents, and ancient texts. It was clear that the Society's ambitions had extended far beyond the pursuit of the Eye of Thoth. Their rituals and experiments had touched on aspects of mind control, reality manipulation, and even attempts to contact otherworldly beings. Sarah Whitman joined us in our research, her determination unwavering despite the recent horrors. Her knowledge of the Society's inner workings and her access to Professor Archer's notes were invaluable as we sought to untangle the web of deceit. "Miguel," Sarah said one afternoon, her eyes tired but resolute, "I've been analyzing some of the Society's correspondence. There are references to a place called Ravenswood Estate. It seems to have been a secondary base of operations for the Society." Elliot's eyebrows arched in interest. "Ravenswood Estate. I've heard of it. It's an old mansion on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and rumored to be haunted. If the Society had a presence there, it's worth investigating." Our decision made, we prepared for our visit to Ravenswood Estate. The mansion had a reputation for being a place of dark legends and ghostly apparitions, but Elliot and I had faced worse. We gathered our equipment, ensuring we were prepared for any eventuality, and set off just as the sun began its descent. The drive to the estate was uneventful, the road winding through dense forests that seemed to close in around us. The mansion itself emerged from the mist like a specter, its grand facade crumbling and overgrown with ivy. Ravenswood Estate had clearly seen better days, but its eerie beauty was undeniable. As we approached, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over us. The front door creaked open with a push, revealing a dimly lit foyer covered in dust and cobwebs. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of dark hallways and forgotten rooms, each one hinting at the opulence that had once defined the estate. We split up to cover more ground, Elliot taking the east wing while I explored the west. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our footsteps on the creaking floorboards. My lantern cast long shadows on the walls, giving the impression that we were not alone. In one of the rooms, I found an old study, its shelves lined with decaying books and ancient artifacts. A large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in papers and notebooks. As I sifted through the documents, one particular journal caught my eye. It was filled with detailed accounts of the Society's experiments, their successes, and their failures. The journal belonged to none other than Vincent Blackwood. His meticulous handwriting detailed his obsession with the Eye of Thoth and the power it promised. But it also revealed his growing paranoia and desperation as the artifact's malevolent influence took hold of him. As I continued to read, I heard a noise behind me, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I turned, my lantern's light sweeping across the room, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Leaving the study, I continued my search, finding more evidence of the Society's activities. Ritualistic paraphernalia, cryptic symbols etched into the walls, and strange artifacts that defied explanation. Each discovery painted a picture of a group driven by ambition and hubris, willing to sacrifice anything to achieve their goals. In the meantime, Elliot had made his own discoveries. He returned to the foyer with a series of old maps and blueprints, each one detailing the layout of the mansion and its hidden chambers. "Miguel, I think I found something. There are references to a hidden basement, a place where the Society conducted its most secretive rituals." With the blueprints as our guide, we made our way to the basement entrance. The narrow stone steps descended into darkness, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the mansion above. It was a cold, sterile space, illuminated by a series of old, flickering lamps. The walls were lined with shelves filled with jars and vials, each one containing strange substances that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. At the center of the room stood a large, stone altar, its surface covered in symbols and etchings that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Elliot and I approached the altar cautiously, aware of the potential dangers that lay ahead. As we examined the symbols, a hidden compartment in the altar caught Elliot's eye. With a deft touch, he triggered the mechanism, revealing a small, ornately carved box. Inside the box was a small, crystal vial filled with a shimmering liquid. It radiated an aura of power, and I could sense the energy emanating from it. "This must be one of the Society's creations," I said, my voice filled with awe and trepidation. "But what does it do?" Before we could ponder further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the basement. We extinguished our lanterns and hid in the shadows, our breaths held as we listened intently. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in a long, black robe. The flickering light revealed the face of none other than Sarah Whitman. Her expression was one of determination, but there was something unsettling in her eyes. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She turned towards us, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "Miguel, Elliot, I knew you'd find this place. The Society's influence is far-reaching, and their secrets must be exposed." Elliot stepped forward, his tone filled with concern. "Sarah, what are you doing here? This place is dangerous." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but there was still an edge to her voice. "I couldn't let you face this alone. The Society's power extends beyond Miskatonic, and we need to understand it fully if we're going to stop them." Her words resonated with the gravity of our situation. We had uncovered dark secrets, but there was still so much we didn't know. The Society's influence was far-reaching, and their ambitions extended beyond the confines of the university. Together, we continued to explore the basement, documenting our findings and piecing together the Society's history. Each discovery brought us closer to understanding the true nature of their power and the depths of their depravity. As the hours passed, the air in the basement grew colder, and the oppressive darkness seemed to press in around us. We knew that our journey was far from over, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But with Sarah by our side and the knowledge we had gained, we were determined to see our mission through to the end. Our exploration of Ravenswood Estate had uncovered a trove of dark secrets and forbidden knowledge. The basement, with its arcane symbols and strange artifacts, had provided us with invaluable insights into the Society of the Arcane's practices. But as we delved deeper, it became clear that the Society's reach extended far beyond what we had initially imagined. With Sarah by our side, we continued to catalog the contents of the hidden chamber. The ancient scrolls, filled with cryptic symbols and detailed accounts of the Society's rituals, were of particular interest. Each one seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, and we painstakingly translated and analyzed the texts. "These scrolls describe rituals that go beyond mere mind control," Sarah said, her voice tinged with unease. "They speak of summoning entities from other dimensions, beings of immense power that can bend reality itself." Elliot's expression grew grim as he examined one of the scrolls. If the Society succeeded in summoning these entities, the consequences could be catastrophic. "We need to find out if any of these rituals were ever completed." As we pored over the scrolls, we found references to a ritual known as the Rite of the Veil, a ceremony that promised to bridge the gap between our world and another, allowing an entity to pass through. The ritual required a series of complex incantations and specific astronomical alignments, making it both difficult and dangerous to perform. Our investigation took on new urgency as we realized the potential threat posed by the Society's experiments. We needed to ensure that the Rite of the Veil had not been completed and that no entity had crossed over into our world. Elliot and I decided to return to Miskatonic University to consult the astronomical records. If the Society had attempted the ritual, there would be evidence in the university's observatory. The journey back to campus was somber, the weight of our discoveries pressing heavily on our minds. The observatory, perched on a hill overlooking the campus, was a relic of a bygone era. Its towering dome housed a powerful telescope, and the walls were lined with charts and records dating back decades. We began our search, combing through the records for any sign of the society's activities. Hours passed as we painstakingly examined the documents. It was Sarah who finally made the breakthrough, her voice filled with excitement. Here it is, an alignment matching the requirements of the Rite of the Veil. It happened 2 months ago. Elliot's eyes narrowed as he studied the records. 2 months ago, that aligns with the first murder. It seems the society attempted the ritual, and something went horribly wrong. Our investigation had uncovered a timeline of events that connected the murders to the society's failed ritual. The deaths of the professors were not random acts of violence. They were the result of the society's desperate attempts to control the entity they had summoned. We need to find out where the ritual was performed, Elliot said, his voice steady with resolve. If there's any trace of the entity, we have to contain it. With the records as our guide, we traced the alignment to a remote location in the forest outside of Arkham. The site, known as Blackwood Clearing, was a place shrouded in mystery and local legends. It was said to be a place where the boundaries between worlds were thin, making it the perfect location for the society's ritual. As we approached the clearing, the trees seemed to close in around us, their branches twisted and gnarled like the fingers of some ancient, malevolent force. The air grew colder, and an unnatural silence settled over the forest, broken only by the sound of our footsteps on the leaf-strewn ground. In the center of the clearing, we found the remnants of the ritual. A circle of blackened earth, surrounded by arcane symbols etched into the ground. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and I could feel the residual energy of the failed ritual pulsing beneath my feet. Elliot knelt to examine the symbols, his expression one of deep concentration. These markings, they're designed to bind and control. The society must have summoned the entity here and tried to contain it. But something went wrong, Sarah added, her voice barely above a whisper. The entity broke free, and the professors paid the price. Our discovery confirmed our worst fears. The entity summoned by the society was still out there, its presence a threat to anyone who crossed its path. We needed to find a way to track it and contain its power before it could cause further harm. Elliot's keen mind quickly formulated a plan. We need to create a containment field, using the same principles the society employed in their rituals. If we can lure the entity back to this site, we can trap it and prevent it from wreaking havoc. The task ahead was daunting, but we had no choice but to proceed. We gathered the necessary materials, candles, ritual implements, and the society's scrolls, and prepared to reenact the binding ceremony. The clearing, with its eerie silence and twisted trees, became the stage for our confrontation with the otherworldly force. As we set up the containment field, the air grew heavy with anticipation. The symbols etched into the ground glowed faintly, resonating with the energy of the ritual. We took our positions around the circle, ready to face the entity that had eluded the society's control. Elliot began the incantations, his voice rising above the rustling of the leaves. The ground trembled, and a chill wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it a sense of impending doom. The air crackled with energy as the symbols glowed brighter, their light illuminating the dark forest. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form shifting and indistinct. The entity, drawn by the ritual, seemed to flicker between this world and another, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring. We stood our ground, our resolve unwavering as we continued the incantations. The entity lashed out, its tendrils of dark energy striking the containment field. The ground shook, and the symbols pulsed with a brilliant light, holding the entity at bay. Elliot's voice grew louder, the incantations reaching a fevered pitch as he channeled his energy into the ritual. With a final, desperate surge, the entity lunged towards us, but the containment field held firm. The air around us shimmered as the ritual reached its climax, and the entity's form began to dissipate, its power drawn into the binding circle. The clearing was filled with a blinding light, and the entity's presence evaporated, leaving only an eerie silence in its wake. The containment field had succeeded, and the entity was trapped, unable to escape the bonds we had forged. The containment of the entity at Blackwood Clearing had brought a momentary sense of relief, but the oppressive weight of our discoveries still lingered. Our journey through the shadows of Miskatonic University and Ravenswood Estate had revealed the depths of the Society of the Arcane's ambitions and the lengths they would go to achieve their goals. But there was still so much we didn't know, and the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. Back at the university, Elliot, Sarah, and I resumed our investigation with renewed determination. The dark legacy of the society had to be fully understood and dismantled to ensure that no one else would fall victim to their machinations. Our first task was to thoroughly document the evidence we had gathered, ensuring that it could be used to expose the society's activities and bring its members to justice. In the dimly lit library, surrounded by stacks of ancient texts and journals, we worked tirelessly to piece together the final chapters of our investigation. The Society of the Arcane had left a trail of secrets and lies, and it was our job to unravel them. "Miguel, take a look at this," Sarah said, her voice barely audible above the rustling of papers. She handed me a weathered journal, its pages filled with notes and diagrams. I found it in one of the hidden compartments at Ravenswood Estate. It belongs to Vincent Blackwood. The journal provided a chilling insight into Blackwood's descent into madness. His obsession with the Eye of Thoth and the power it promised had driven him to commit unspeakable acts. But it also hinted at a deeper connection to the Society's activities, one that extended beyond the boundaries of Miskatonic University. Elliot leaned over to examine the journal, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "This passage mentions a network of like-minded individuals, other secret societies that share the same goals. It seems the Society of the Arcane is just one piece of a much larger puzzle." The revelation was both startling and terrifying. If Blackwood's journal was to be believed, the Society's influence extended far beyond what we had initially thought. We needed to identify and expose these other groups to ensure that their dangerous experiments could be stopped. Our investigation led us to a series of coded messages and correspondences between Blackwood and other prominent figures in the academic and business world. Each letter hinted at meetings, alliances, and shared ambitions, painting a picture of a vast network of power and influence. As we delved deeper into the correspondence, we uncovered the name of a prominent businessman, Charles Whitmore, who appeared to be a key player in this shadowy network. Whitmore, a wealthy industrialist with a reputation for ruthlessness, had funded numerous academic endeavors and held significant sway over various institutions. "Elliot, we need to confront Whitmore," I said, my voice filled with resolve. "If he's involved in this, we need to know the full extent of his actions." Our decision made, we prepared for our visit to Whitmore's estate. The mansion, an imposing structure surrounded by lush gardens, exuded an air of opulence and power. It was clear that Whitmore was a man who valued control and influence above all else. We were greeted at the door by Whitmore's butler, who escorted us to the grand study. Whitmore himself awaited us, his tall frame and piercing eyes giving off an aura of authority. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "We're investigating the activities of the Society of the Arcane," Elliot replied, his tone calm but firm. "We have reason to believe you're involved in their network." Whitmore's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "I assure you, gentlemen, I have no knowledge of any such society. My interests lie solely in the advancement of science and industry." Elliot wasn't convinced. "We've uncovered evidence that suggests otherwise. Correspondence between you and Vincent Blackwood, discussions of rituals, power, and control. We need the truth, Mr. Whitmore." For a moment, Whitmore's facade cracked, and his eyes narrowed with a dangerous glint. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Mr. Brooks. I advise you to be cautious with your accusations." The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken threats. It was clear that Whitmore was not going to reveal anything willingly, and we needed more concrete evidence to bring him to justice. As we left the estate, Elliot's mind was already working on a plan. "We need to find someone on the inside, someone who can provide us with the information we need. If Whitmore is as powerful as we suspect, he has to have allies, and not all of them will be loyal. Our search for an informant led us to one of Whitmore's former associates, a man named Henry Caldwell. Caldwell, a disgraced academic who had once been part of the society's inner circle, had fallen out of favor and was now living a quiet life on the outskirts of town. When we arrived at Caldwell's modest home, the man who answered the door was a shadow of his former self. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now dull and filled with a mix of fear and regret. "Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," he said, his voice trembling. I knew you would come eventually." "Mr. Caldwell, we need your help," Elliot said, his tone gentle but firm. "We need to expose Whitmore and his network. Will you help us?" Caldwell hesitated, his gaze flickering between us and the floor. I can't. They're too powerful. If they find out I've spoken to you." "We can protect you," I interjected, my voice filled with sincerity. "But we need the truth. Innocent lives are at stake." After a moment of silence, Caldwell sighed and nodded. "All right, I'll tell you everything." Over the next few hours, Caldwell revealed the inner workings of the society and Whitmore's network. He spoke of secret meetings, alliances with other powerful figures, and rituals that went beyond anything we had imagined. It was a chilling account of ambition, greed, and the pursuit of power at any cost. Armed with this new information, we knew that our task was far from over. Whitmore and his network needed to be exposed and dismantled, and the dark legacy of the Society of the Arcane had to be brought to light. Our journey had taken us from the shadows of Miskatonic University to the heart of a vast conspiracy, and the path ahead was filled with danger. But with Elliot's determination, Sarah's knowledge, and Caldwell's testimony, we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The moon hung low in the night sky as we left Caldwell's home, our minds racing with the weight of his revelations. Charles Whitmore's influence extended far beyond what we had anticipated, and his network of like-minded individuals posed a significant threat. We needed to act quickly and decisively to dismantle their operations and bring them to justice. Back at Miskatonic University, we worked through the night, compiling the evidence we had gathered and planning our next steps. The documents, journals, and testimonies we had collected formed a damning case against Whitmore and his associates. But we needed more than just evidence. We needed a strategy to expose their activities to the world. Elliot's sharp mind formulated a plan. "We need to gather all the key players in one place," he said, his voice steady and determined. "If we can confront them with the evidence and force their hand, we can bring their network crashing down." Our best chance was to use Whitmore's own network against him. We knew that he was planning a grand gala at his estate, a gathering of influential figures from the academic, business, and political spheres. It was the perfect opportunity to expose the truth and hold them accountable. The days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind of preparation. We coordinated with law enforcement, ensuring that they would be ready to act when the time came. Sarah's knowledge of the society's inner workings proved invaluable as we identified key targets and potential allies. Caldwell's testimony provided the final piece of the puzzle, giving us the leverage we needed to confront Whitmore and his associates. The night of the gala arrived, and the atmosphere at Whitmore's estate was one of opulence and excess. The grand ballroom was filled with the elite of society, their laughter and conversation masking the undercurrent of tension that we knew existed beneath the surface. Elliot, Sarah, and I mingled with the guests, our eyes and ears alert for any signs of Whitmore's inner circle. The ornate chandeliers cast a warm glow over the room, but the shadows seemed to hold secrets that only we could see. As the evening progressed, we made our way to a secluded corner of the ballroom, where Whitmore and a group of his closest allies were engaged in hushed conversation. Elliot's voice cut through the air, firm and unyielding. "Mr. Whitmore, I believe we have some matters to discuss." The room fell silent as all eyes turned towards us. Whitmore's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Mr. Brooks, this is hardly the time or place for such discussions." Elliot stepped forward, his presence commanding. "On the contrary, Mr. Whitmore, this is the perfect time. We have evidence of your involvement in the Society of the Arcane and your network's activities. We have testimonies, documents, and records that expose your actions. The tension in the room was palpable, and the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Whitmore's allies shifted uncomfortably, their confidence waning in the face of our accusations. Whitmore's voice was cold and measured. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Brooks. I hope you have the evidence to back them up." Elliot nodded to Sarah, who produced a folder containing the damning documents. "We have everything we need, Mr. Whitmore, and we've already coordinated with law enforcement. They're ready to act on our findings." As the gravity of the situation sank in, Whitmore's facade began to crack. His eyes narrowed with a mixture of anger and desperation. "You think you can bring me down? You have no idea the power you're dealing with." Elliot's voice was steady and unwavering. "We're not afraid of your power, Mr. Whitmore. The truth will prevail, and justice will be served." At that moment, law enforcement officers entered the ballroom, their presence adding weight to our words. Whitmore's allies looked around in panic, their confidence shattered as the reality of their situation set in. One by one, they were taken into custody, their protests falling on deaf ears. Whitmore himself was escorted out, his expression a mask of cold fury. The guests, once oblivious to the darkness that had been lurking among them, watched in stunned silence as the network of deceit and corruption was dismantled before their eyes. The gala, once a symbol of opulence and power, had become the stage for a reckoning. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, had been brought to light, and justice was finally being served. As the night wore on, the enormity of what we had accomplished began to sink in. The Society of the Arcane's grip on Miskatonic University and beyond had been broken, and their dark legacy was laid bare for all to see. But our journey was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions and dangerous secrets yet to be uncovered. Elliot, Sarah, and I stood on the steps of Whitmore's estate, the cool night air filled with a sense of quiet triumph. Our partnership had been tested by the darkness we had faced, but we had emerged stronger, ready to continue our quest for truth and justice, no matter where it led us next. The aftermath of the gala left us with a fleeting sense of triumph, but our task was far from complete. The shadowy network that Whitmore had cultivated extended further than we had initially imagined, and dismantling it would require perseverance, strategy, and unwavering determination. With Whitmore and his closest allies in custody, the focus shifted to uncovering the full extent of the Society of the Arcane's influence. Law enforcement was now heavily involved, and we worked closely with them, sharing the evidence we had gathered and providing insights into the Society's operations. The quiet corridors of Miskatonic University felt different in the light of day. Students went about their routines, oblivious to the dark secrets that had been exposed within their midst. But for Elliot, Sarah, and me, every step we took was a reminder of the journey we had embarked upon and the shadows we had faced. In the library, surrounded by the familiar scent of old books and the soft rustle of turning pages, we continued to sift through the mountain of documents we had collected. The coded messages, journals, and correspondences painted a vivid picture of a network driven by ambition, greed, and the pursuit of power at any cost. "Miguel, I found something," Sarah said, her voice a mix of excitement and caution. She handed me a letter, its contents cryptic but revealing. "This letter mentions a place called Hawthorne Manor. It seems to be another location connected to the Society." Elliot leaned over to examine the letter, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Hawthorne Manor, that name sounds familiar. I believe it's an old estate on the outskirts of town, long abandoned. If the Society had a presence there, we need to investigate." Our decision made, we prepared for our visit to Hawthorne Manor. The estate had a reputation for being a place of dark legends and ghostly apparitions, but we had faced worse. We gathered our equipment, ensuring we were prepared for any eventuality, and set off as the sun began its descent. The drive to the manor was uneventful, the road winding through dense forests that seemed to close in around us. The mansion itself emerged from the mist like a specter, its grand facade crumbling and overgrown with ivy. Hawthorne Manor had clearly seen better days, but its eerie beauty was undeniable. As we approached, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over us. The front door creaked open with a push, revealing a dimly lit foyer covered in dust and cobwebs. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of dark hallways and forgotten rooms, each one hinting at the opulence that had once defined the estate. We split up to cover more ground, Elliot taking the east wing while Sarah and I explored the west. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our footsteps on the creaking floorboards. My lantern cast long shadows on the walls, giving the impression that we were not alone. In one of the rooms, we found an old study, its shelves lined with decaying books and ancient artifacts. A large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in papers and notebooks. As we sifted through the documents, one particular journal caught our eye. It was filled with detailed accounts of the Society's experiments, their successes, and their failures. "This journal belongs to none other than Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne," Sarah said, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. It seems she was deeply involved in the Society's activities, even more so than we realized. The journal provided a chilling insight into Dr. Hawthorne's descent into madness. Her obsession with the occult and the power it promised had driven her to commit unspeakable acts. But it also hinted at a deeper connection to the Society's activities, one that extended beyond the boundaries of Miskatonic University. As we continued to explore the study, we found more evidence of the Society's activities: ritualistic paraphernalia, cryptic symbols etched into the walls, and strange artifacts that defied explanation. Each discovery painted a picture of a group driven by ambition and hubris, willing to sacrifice anything to achieve their goals. Meanwhile, Elliot had made his own discoveries. He returned to the foyer with a series of old maps and blueprints, each one detailing the layout of the mansion and its hidden chambers. "Miguel, Sarah, I think I found something. There are references to a hidden subbasement, a place where the Society conducted its most secretive rituals." With the blueprints as our guide, we made our way to the subbasement entrance. The narrow stone steps descended into darkness, the air growing colder with each step. The subbasement was a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the mansion above. It was a cold, sterile space, illuminated by a series of old, flickering lamps. The walls were lined with shelves filled with jars and vials, each one containing strange substances that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. At the center of the room stood a large, stone altar, its surface covered in symbols and etchings that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Elliot and I approached the altar cautiously, aware of the potential dangers that lay ahead. As we examined the symbols, a hidden compartment in the altar caught Elliot's eye. With a deft touch, he triggered the mechanism, revealing a small, ornately carved box. Inside the box was a small, crystal vial filled with a shimmering liquid. It radiated an aura of power, and I could sense the energy emanating from it. "This must be one of the Society's creations," I said, my voice filled with awe and trepidation. "But what does it do?" Before we could ponder further, the sound of footsteps echoed through the subbasement. We extinguished our lanterns and hid in the shadows, our breaths held as we listened intently. A figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in a long, black robe. The flickering light revealed the face of none other than Professor Archer, who we had thought was a victim of the Society's machinations. His expression was one of determination, but there was something unsettling in his eyes. "Professor Archer?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He turned towards us, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "Miguel, Elliot, Sarah, I knew you'd find this place. The Society's influence is far-reaching, and their secrets must be exposed." Elliot stepped forward, his tone filled with concern. "Professor Archer, what are you doing here? We thought you were dead." Archer's expression softened slightly, but there was still an edge to his voice. "I faked my death to escape the Society's clutches. They were becoming too powerful, and I knew I had to find a way to stop them from within." His words resonated with the gravity of our situation. We had uncovered dark secrets, but there was still so much we didn't know. The society's influence was far-reaching, and their ambitions extended beyond the confines of Miskatonic University. With Professor Archer now part of our team, we felt a renewed sense of purpose. His knowledge of the society's inner workings and his first-hand experience with their rituals were invaluable assets. We knew that Hawthorne Manor held more secrets, and we were determined to uncover them all. Our exploration of the subbasement had revealed a chilling glimpse into the society's experiments, but we sensed that there was more hidden within the mansion's crumbling walls. With Professor Archer's guidance, we continued our investigation, searching for clues that would lead us to the heart of the society's dark power. The mansion's labyrinthine corridors seemed to stretch on endlessly, each turn revealing new rooms filled with decaying furniture and forgotten artifacts. The air was thick with the scent of mold and decay, and the flickering light from our lanterns cast eerie shadows that danced on the walls. In one of the more secluded wings of the mansion, we discovered a hidden door behind a heavy tapestry. The door, nearly invisible to the untrained eye, led to a narrow staircase that descended into an even deeper level of the subbasement. As we made our way down the stairs, the temperature dropped, and an oppressive sense of dread settled over us. The walls were lined with more occult symbols, their malevolent energy palpable. The air grew thick with the scent of incense and something more sinister, a scent that hinted at death and decay. At the bottom of the stairs, we found ourselves in a vast underground chamber. The room was dimly lit by a series of candles arranged in a circle, their flames casting a flickering, ominous glow. In the center of the chamber stood a large, ornate altar, its surface stained with what appeared to be dried blood. Elliot's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the scene. "This is where they performed their most powerful rituals," he said, his voice tinged with both awe and fear. "The energy in this room is overwhelming." As we approached the altar, we found more evidence of the society's activities. Ancient texts filled with incantations, ritual implements, and strange artifacts that defied explanation. Each discovery painted a picture of a group that had delved deep into forbidden knowledge, willing to sacrifice anything to achieve their goals. Professor Archer's expression grew grim as he examined the texts. "These incantations, they speak of summoning entities from other dimensions." The society was not just experimenting with mind control, they were trying to manipulate reality itself. The implications of his words were chilling. If the society had succeeded in their experiments, the consequences could be catastrophic. We needed to find out if any of their rituals had been completed and what the full extent of their power was. As we continued to explore the chamber, we found a series of detailed accounts of the society's experiments. The journals described attempts to summon and bind powerful entities, each one more dangerous than the last. But they also spoke of failures, of rituals gone wrong, and the terrible price paid by those who dared to tamper with the fabric of reality. One journal, in particular, caught our attention. It belonged to Dr. Evelyn Hawthorne and detailed her final experiment, a ritual designed to summon an entity known as the Whisperer in the Dark. The journal described the entity as a being of immense power, capable of bending reality to its will. Elliot's expression grew even more serious as he read the journal. If they succeeded in summoning this entity, it could still be out there, waiting. We need to find a way to contain it before it can cause any more harm. Our investigation had taken a dangerous turn. The entity known as the Whisperer in the Dark represented a threat far greater than anything we had faced before. We needed to prepare for a confrontation that could test the limits of our resolve and our understanding of the occult. With the knowledge we had gained from the Society's texts and Professor Archer's expertise, we formulated a plan to locate and contain the entity. The journals provided clues to the entity's nature and the incantations needed to bind it, but the task ahead was daunting. We knew that failure could result in unimaginable consequences. Our first step was to gather the necessary materials for the binding ritual. The Society's texts detailed the components required: rare herbs, specially crafted sigils, and ritual implements imbued with protective enchantments. We spent days tracking down each item, knowing that our success depended on our thorough preparation. As we worked, a sense of camaraderie grew among us. Professor Archer's presence brought a wealth of knowledge and experience, and Sarah's dedication to the cause was unwavering. Elliot's determination and leadership kept us focused, and I knew that together, we could face the challenges ahead. The night of the binding ritual arrived, and we made our way to the location described in Dr. Hawthorne's journal, a secluded glade deep within the forest. The trees closed in around us, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and an unnatural stillness settled over the glade. We set up the ritual circle, carefully arranging the candles, sigils, and protective implements. The symbols etched into the ground glowed faintly, resonating with the energy of the incantations we had prepared. We took our positions around the circle, our breaths held in anticipation. Elliot began the incantations, his voice rising above the rustling of the leaves. The air crackled with energy as the symbols glowed brighter, their light illuminating the dark forest. The ground trembled, and a chill wind swept through the glade, carrying with it a sense of impending doom. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, its form shifting and indistinct. The whisperer in the dark, drawn by the ritual, seemed to flicker between this world and another, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring. We stood our ground, our resolve unwavering as we continued the incantations. The entity lashed out, its tendrils of dark energy striking the containment field. The ground shook, and the symbols pulsed with a brilliant light, holding the entity at bay. Elliot's voice grew louder, the incantations reaching a fevered pitch as he channeled his energy into the ritual. With a final, desperate surge, the entity lunged towards us, but the containment field held firm. The air around us shimmered as the ritual reached its climax, and the entity's form began to dissipate, its power drawn into the binding circle. The glade was filled with a blinding light, and the entity's presence evaporated, leaving only an eerie silence in its wake. The containment field had succeeded, and the whisperer in the dark was trapped, unable to escape the bonds we had forged. We stood in the now quiet glade, the weight of our ordeal pressing heavily upon us. The society of the Arcane's dark legacy had been confronted, and the entity they had summoned was contained. But our journey was far from over. The echoes of the past still lingered, and there were more secrets yet to be uncovered. With the entity contained and the immediate threat neutralized, we knew that our work was not yet finished. The society of the Arcane's influence had been diminished, but the scars of their actions would take time to heal. We needed to ensure that their dark practices were fully exposed and that those responsible were held accountable. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, we gathered our equipment and began the journey back to Miskatonic University. The road ahead was uncertain, but we were determined to continue our quest for truth and justice, no matter where it led us next. The dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the quiet town of Arkham. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on our minds, but there was a sense of accomplishment in knowing that we had contained the Whisperer in the dark and disrupted the society of the Arcane's plans. However, the scars left by their actions would take time to heal, and there were still unanswered questions that demanded our attention. Back at Miskatonic University, we met with law enforcement to review the evidence we had gathered and discuss the next steps. The society of the Arcane's influence had been significantly weakened, but we needed to ensure that those responsible were held accountable and that their dark practices were fully exposed. Our first task was to thoroughly document the findings from Hawthorne Manor. The journals, artifacts, and ritual implements we had collected provided a comprehensive account of the society's activities and their attempts to manipulate reality. The law enforcement officers listened intently as we presented our evidence, their expressions a mix of awe and concern. Elliot's voice was steady as he addressed the room. The Society of the Arcane's experiments went far beyond mere academic curiosity. They were willing to sacrifice anything to achieve their goals, and their actions have had far-reaching consequences. We need to ensure that their network is fully dismantled and that those involved are brought to justice. The officers nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthened by the weight of the evidence we had presented. With their support, we began the process of identifying and apprehending the remaining members of the society. Each arrest brought us one step closer to unraveling the full extent of their influence and ensuring that their dark legacy would be brought to light. As the days passed, the university began to heal from the turmoil that had gripped it. Students returned to their studies, and the campus slowly regained its sense of normalcy. But for Elliot, Sarah, Professor Archer, and me, the journey was far from over. We knew that there were still hidden threats and dangerous secrets yet to be uncovered. One evening, as we reviewed the remaining documents from Hawthorne Manor, Sarah's eyes widened with a sudden realization. "Miguel, Elliot, take a look at this," she said, pointing to a passage in one of the journals. "It mentions a hidden vault beneath the university, a place where the society stored their most valuable and dangerous artifacts." Elliot's expression grew serious as he examined the passage. "If this vault exists, it could hold the key to understanding the full extent of the society's power. We need to find it and secure its contents before they can fall into the wrong hands." With the passage as our guide, we began our search for the hidden vault. The university's underground tunnels, rarely explored by students and faculty, seemed the most likely location. Armed with lanterns and the society's blueprints, we ventured into the labyrinthine passages beneath the campus. The tunnels were dark and damp, their walls covered in moss and grime. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and the only sound was the echo of our footsteps on the stone floor. We moved cautiously, aware that the society's influence could still linger in the shadows. After hours of searching, we finally stumbled upon a concealed door hidden behind a pile of debris. The door, reinforced with iron and covered in occult symbols, confirmed that we had found the vault. With a sense of trepidation, we carefully opened the door and stepped inside. The vault was a large, dimly lit chamber filled with shelves and cabinets, each one containing ancient artifacts, ritual implements, and arcane texts. The air was charged with a sense of power, and I could feel the malevolent energy emanating from the objects around us. Elliot and I approached a large, ornate chest at the center of the room. With a shared glance of determination, we opened the chest, revealing its contents. Inside were several vials of shimmering liquid, each one radiating an otherworldly aura. There were also ancient scrolls filled with incantations and diagrams, detailing the society's most dangerous experiments. Professor Archer's voice was filled with a mix of awe and fear. These artifacts represent the pinnacle of the society's knowledge and power. If misused, they could pose a significant threat. We need to ensure that they are secured and studied carefully to prevent any further harm. As we cataloged the contents of the vault, we found a series of correspondences that shed light on the society's connections to other secretive groups. These letters hinted at alliances, shared goals, and coordinated efforts to achieve their ambitions. The network of power and influence we had uncovered was even more extensive than we had imagined. With the vault's contents secured, we knew that our next step was to expose the full extent of the society's network and bring their allies to justice. The journey ahead was filled with challenges, but our resolve was unwavering. We had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to continue our quest for truth and justice. As we left the vault and made our way back to the surface, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the university. The campus, with its historic buildings and tree-lined pathways, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the new day. The dawn's first light cast a warm glow over Arkham, but the shadows of the past still lingered heavily in our minds. The revelation of the hidden vault beneath the university had brought us closer to understanding the full extent of the Society of the Arcane's power, but we knew there was still much work to be done. Our immediate task was to secure the vault and its contents. Law enforcement was notified, and officers were stationed to ensure that no unauthorized individuals could access the artifacts and texts. The university's administration was briefed on the situation, and steps were taken to safeguard the institution from any further influence of the society. Elliot, Sarah, Professor Archer, and I spent the next several days meticulously cataloging the contents of the vault. Each artifact, each scroll, each vial of shimmering liquid was carefully documented and analyzed. The journals provided detailed accounts of the society's experiments, and we uncovered more evidence of their attempts to manipulate reality and summon otherworldly entities. One particularly disturbing discovery was a series of rituals designed to control and bind entities from other dimensions. The society had been experimenting with ways to harness these beings' power, using them to achieve their own ambitions. The risks were immense, and the consequences of their failures had been devastating. As we delved deeper into the vault's contents, we found references to a powerful artifact known as the Obsidian Mirror. The text described it as a portal to other dimensions, capable of allowing entities to cross over into our world. The implications were chilling, and we knew that securing this artifact was of paramount importance. Our search for the Obsidian Mirror led us to a hidden chamber within the vault, its entrance concealed by an intricate mechanism. With careful precision, we activated the mechanism and entered the chamber, our lanterns casting flickering light on the walls adorned with arcane symbols. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a large, black mirror. Its surface seemed to absorb the light, reflecting nothing but an eerie, inky darkness. The mirror radiated an aura of power, and I could feel the malevolent energy emanating from it. "This must be the Obsidian Mirror," Professor Archer said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and trepidation. "We need to handle it with extreme caution. If the texts are correct, it could pose a significant threat." Elliot's expression was one of determination. "We need to secure this artifact and study it carefully. If it truly is a portal to other dimensions, we need to ensure that no one can use it for nefarious purposes." With the Obsidian Mirror safely contained, we continued our investigation into the Society's activities. The correspondences we had found hinted at a broader network of like-minded individuals, and we needed to uncover their identities and dismantle their operations. Our journey took us to various locations across Arkham, each one holding a piece of the puzzle. We followed leads, interviewed witnesses, and gathered evidence, all the while aware that we were facing a powerful and dangerous adversary. One evening, as we reviewed our findings in the library, Sarah's eyes lit up with a sudden realization. "Miguel, Elliot, take a look at this," she said, pointing to a passage in one of the letters. "It mentions a gathering of the Society's remaining members at an old theater on the edge of town. If we can intercept them, we might be able to apprehend the key players." Elliot's expression grew serious as he examined the passage. "This could be our chance to deal a decisive blow to the Society. We need to act quickly and coordinate with law enforcement to ensure that the operation goes smoothly." The night of the gathering arrived, and we prepared for the operation with a sense of both anticipation and trepidation. The old theater, long abandoned and shrouded in mystery, stood as a silent witness to the events that were about to unfold. With law enforcement in place, we made our way into the theater, our footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The dim light of our lanterns revealed the decaying grandeur of the building, its once opulent interior now covered in dust and cobwebs. In the main auditorium, we found the Society's remaining members gathered in hushed conversation. The air was thick with tension as Elliot's voice cut through the silence. "This ends tonight. The Society of the Arcane's dark legacy will not continue." The Society members turned to face us, their expressions a mix of shock and defiance. One of them stepped forward, his voice filled with anger. "You think you can stop us? The power we seek is beyond your comprehension." Elliot's voice was steady and unwavering. "We're not afraid of your power. The truth will prevail, and justice will be served." At that moment, law enforcement officers entered the auditorium, their presence adding weight to our words. The Society members looked around in panic, their confidence shattered as the reality of their situation set in. One by one, they were taken into custody, their protests falling on deaf ears. The gathering, once a symbol of their power and influence, had become the stage for their downfall. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, had been brought to light, and justice was finally being served. As the night wore on, the enormity of what we had accomplished began to sink in. The Society of the Arcane's grip on Arkham and beyond had been broken, and their dark legacy was laid bare for all to see. But our journey was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions and dangerous secrets yet to be uncovered. Elliot, Sarah, Professor Archer, and I stood on the steps of the old theater, the cool night air filled with a sense of quiet triumph. Our partnership had been tested by the darkness we had faced, but we had emerged stronger, ready to continue our quest for truth and justice, no matter where it led us next. The dawn of a new day brought a sense of quiet determination as we prepared to face the final remnants of the Society of the Arcane. The confrontation at the old theater had dealt a significant blow to their network, but we knew there were still loose ends to tie up and lingering threats to address. Our focus now shifted to uncovering the full extent of the Society's alliances and ensuring that every last member was brought to justice. The documents and correspondences we had collected provided a roadmap of their connections, and we systematically worked to dismantle their operations. One of the most pressing concerns was the potential existence of other artifacts like the obsidian mirror. If the Society had access to similar objects of power, they could pose a significant threat. Our investigation led us to a series of hidden caches scattered across Arkham, each one containing artifacts and texts that revealed more about the Society's dark ambitions. As we delved deeper into our investigation, we discovered that the Society had been attempting to harness the power of another artifact known as the Crimson Chalice. The text described it as a vessel capable of channeling immense energy and amplifying the effects of their rituals. If the Society had succeeded in obtaining and activating the chalice, the consequences could be catastrophic. With the clock ticking, we focused our efforts on locating the Crimson Chalice. Our search led us to an old crypt on the outskirts of town, a place steeped in legend and rumored to be a site of ancient power. The crypt, with its weathered stone walls and overgrown entrance, seemed to exude an aura of malevolence. Elliot, Sarah, Professor Archer, and I approached the crypt with caution, aware of the potential dangers that lay ahead. The air grew colder as we descended into the darkness, our lanterns casting flickering light on the walls adorned with cryptic symbols. At the heart of the crypt, we found a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed by a heavy stone door. With a sense of trepidation, we pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with ancient relics and ritual implements. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested the Crimson Chalice. The chalice was an ornate, blood-red vessel that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Its presence was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, and I could feel the immense power it contained. "We need to secure the chalice and ensure that it's kept safe," Elliot said, his voice steady with resolve. If the Society had succeeded in using it, the consequences would have been unimaginable. With the Crimson Chalice safely contained, we continued our efforts to expose the Society's remaining members and their allies. Our investigation took us to various locations across Arkham, each one holding a piece of the puzzle. We followed leads, interviewed witnesses, and gathered evidence, all the while aware that we were facing a powerful and dangerous adversary. The final confrontation came on a stormy night, as we tracked the Society's last remaining leaders to an abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The rain poured down in torrents, lightning illuminating the sky as we approached the dilapidated building. Inside, we found the Society's leaders gathered around a large table, their faces a mix of determination and desperation. The air was thick with tension as Elliot's voice cut through the darkness. "This ends tonight. The Society of the Arcane's dark legacy will not continue." The leaders turned to face us, their expressions a mix of shock and defiance. One of them stepped forward, his voice filled with anger. "You think you can stop us? The power we seek is beyond your comprehension." Elliot's voice was steady and unwavering. "We're not afraid of your power. The truth will prevail, and justice will be served." At that moment, law enforcement officers entered the mansion, their presence adding weight to our words. The Society leaders looked around in panic, their confidence shattered as the reality of their situation set in. One by one, they were taken into custody, their protests falling on deaf ears. The gathering, once a symbol of their power and influence, had become the stage for their downfall. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, had been brought to light, and justice was finally being served. As the storm raged outside, the enormity of what we had accomplished began to sink in. The Society of the Arcane's grip on Arkham and beyond had been broken, and their dark legacy was laid bare for all to see. But our journey was far from over. There were still many unanswered questions and dangerous secrets yet to be uncovered. Elliot, Sarah, Professor Archer, and I stood in the now quiet mansion, the weight of our journey pressing heavily upon us. Our partnership had been tested by the darkness we had faced, but we had emerged stronger, ready to continue our quest for truth and justice, no matter where it led us next. Our investigation had taken us through the shadows of Miskatonic University, Ravenswood Estate, and beyond. We had confronted ancient forces, uncovered dark secrets, and faced unimaginable horrors. But our story was far from over. The echoes of the past still lingered, and there were more mysteries yet to be unraveled. With Elliot, Sarah, and Professor Archer by my side, I knew that we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road to justice was long and arduous, but together we would see it through to the end. Our quest for truth and justice would continue, no matter where it led us next.